Hi, welcome to Pay It Forward. Well, I've taken off my Grinch hat for the day, just for one day, to bring you a Christmas project. I did promise you something Christmassy and I couldn't quite come at Santa. I'm sorry I couldn't do it. So I've called Rudolph in and he's standing in for Santa for this project, dressed up in some gorgeous little Christmas colours. You can add so much to this project, and he also has a little sack that we make up with some little wrapped presents. You can see I've got some little puppies and kittens there from my previous videos. You can really mix this one up, bring in some of the other things from my other videos that you've already made. Looks like someone's getting a puppy and a kitty for Christmas here. So look, it's a great pattern even for beginners, and I have kept it super simple for you. So even some new techniques there to learn though, so I hope you'll enjoy it. You just need your free pattern. I've got that all ready for you. Now, it is in the description box below. Some people are still asking me, where's the free pattern? It's just in the drop down box below the video and you will find that link. So you just need to print those pattern templates out on your own home printer. If you set your printer to be printing at actual size or A4, you will have best results. And do use the measuring bar that I've got on your pattern templates. It will help you make sure that your pattern pieces are right. I do include all of my seam allowances within my patterns. So let's get busy making Rudolph. So let's have a look at our materials and requirements we need for making our Rudolph. So we're going to start with our main body pieces, and I am using some flannelette which is interfaced with my fusible woven medium weight interfacing. You will need to interface it. So we've got two of those pieces and I've got them both the same colour. So I do all of my work on my front panel, and I don't worry too much about the back panel. You can decorate the back panel as well, that's entirely up to you, but I'm going to focus all of my work on the front there. So, and we're going to be adding the lower pants section, and that is, I've cut that from a piece of felt. You can use fabric if you want, with fusible webbing, so that we can press that one on into place. And then we're going to be adding and decorating the front of this is really totally up to you. There's all sorts of trims and things that you can get, but I'm going to be adding just that little pom-pom braid just across the front there. As I said, if you want to continue it all the way around, you can add that last once our doll is all put together. This one is actually put together very similar to my Kimmy doll. So if you've made my Kimmy doll, you'll know exactly what to do here. So I'm also going to be adding just a little belt, so a little braid there, and I've got a little buckle. There's all sorts of buttons and things that you can add. I will just simply be adding a couple of extra buttons up the center there. We have little arms coming in over here, so you don't see a lot of that, but it's nice to have it all there. And then we are going to be needing our arms. So this is one of our little completed arms. Now the arms are two different shapes and lengths because I've got them made so that they're not holding together. One drops down further and one sits up a little higher. It just alternates it a little, and it also allows you to tuck little things in the arms and so on. One of those arms just has the loop of that little sack over the wrist there. So this is a completed little arm and they're sewn onto the front. So what we need for that is we need our little sleeve pieces. So you've got a sleeve piece for your arm one and an actual arm that we have here. And then the same for the arm two. Now the sleeve pieces are just cut as usual, cut one reverse. And what I do with the arm pieces is I've got my two pieces of fabric. There's nothing on those because we want that nice and easy to turn through. I've pressed them together and I've traced around my shape there, and what we'll be doing is sewing directly on that line, leaving that open so that it's much easier to sew a small shape like that and turn it through quickly. So have that one ready, and I'm just using that sort of brown color to match the top of his head. So that's it for the body section, except for the base. So the base, which we're going to be pulling in, we need a nice firm base. If you have a teddy bear disc that is 75mm, go ahead and use that. It's absolutely perfect. If not, I've given you the template to cut out one in a very firm mat board. If you cut out a couple of pieces of picture framing mat board and glue them together, you'll find that that'll be as firm as a wooden disc. And we also need one base cut from felt with interfacing applied there. So that's all ready to go. So then we want to look at our head pieces. So I make the head up in felt, and I've got the dark brown for the back and the lighter colour for the front. You can make this up in any colour you like. I'm just doing a variety of different colours to really show up that red nose. So make sure you transfer all of your markings too, they're really important, and both of those pieces are interfaced with that same fusible woven cotton interfacing. So then we're going to be needing our top head piece, which I've also cut in felt, and I do think it works best in felt, and that has fusible webbing applied. I'm going to be adding a couple of just 3 little buttons there just for some extra detailing, giving him that reindeer sort of a look. And then we will be adding the eyes, which are again white pieces of felt with fusible webbing applied there. We're going for a very animated look for this project. I think it tends to work best. We're not going for realistic here. And then we've got our beautiful red nose. Of course, you can make it any colour you like, but mine's actually depicting Rudolph. So there we go. And then you need your ears. And we have got those. I've made them the 2 different browns, and they're made from double felt. I've cut them from double felt. Double felt is just 2 pieces of felt joined together with fusible webbing. I'm going to put a link up the top there for you. It's a video that I've made that talks to you about preparing your felt for sewing, and it has your double felt in there. This is the completed little ear. We're going to be doing some blanket stitching around that, and we're going to be inserting that into the seam. So that's a lovely little look there. So as well as that, we're going to be needing some eyes that we're going to pop through here. Now you can just use buttons, you can use safety eyes. I'm using safety eyes. I'm going for a 12mm, but it does have a clear surround, so the eye itself is probably about 10mm. We're going to be just popping those through, and they work really, really well with this project. And of course, you can make them any colour you like. You can make those eyes a bit smaller. If you make it smaller, he will look slightly more quizzical. So 12mm seems to fit really well. So of course you need the backs for those as well, because we'll be clamping those on. Now we're going to do something a little bit tricky, but easy for our antlers. Now because I'm making a Rudolph, I do want some little antlers. Normally in my work I would sculpt them. So I've come up with this, which I think is the easiest way to do it. A nice tidy way to add some antlers. It's just made up from felt and a wonder clip. So you can see there, we're just going to be clipping those antlers in place to that finished head. They sit up beautifully, and they're very, very easy to make that way. Inserting antlers into seams or adding antlers, to me they always look messy, and they're always fiddly and difficult, whereas this you can just clip them on, and you can do anything you like to these. You could add little beads to them, decorate them, whatever you like. So what you'll need for those antlers is your little standard size wonder clips. I just go for a clear one, and then you will need your 2 pieces, which we're going to be making for the top of the antler, and then this just covers the back of the clip, so as I've done there. So it's all very neat and tidy. You will need some hot glue for this as well. So that's for our antlers. And then we're going to be making that beautiful little sack. So that lovely little sack of toys. Now I've just used an old napkin And it's got a little bit of detailing on here, which is nice. It's got that lovely Hessian kind of look about it. A slightly heavier weight fabric is better for the sack, I think. I've already turned those edges under. I'll show you how to do that. But I've given you the measurements for that one there. That's all ready to go. And we're going to be making a little casing across the top just to slip a little cord through. So you can use any kind of ribbon or cord. I'll just be using some braided cord for that one. And inside of our sack you can add anything you like. So I've just got a selection of little gifts here that I've made up with my Christmas fabrics. You can see, added a few little bows and some ribbon and so on, and we're going to be tucking those into the sack. You can see a roll of fabric there because I'd be happy to receive fabric for Christmas. So there's quite a few there, and also I'll be tucking in a little bear popping out of that sack there. All of these patterns are available in my video list. You'll find this little bear is with a bag charm, and also I'm going to have tucked into the crook of little Rudolph's arm, I'm just going to add a little one of my puppies, and also you'll see those. I've also got a little kitty with a Kimmy doll. So don't be afraid to mix the patterns up and use pieces from other patterns. Somebody will be getting a puppy for Christmas, so we will pop that over Rudolph's arm. So the way that I made the presents was I just wrapped up little light things like little pieces of polystyrene. Keeps it all nice and light, but you could really wrap up absolutely anything you like. I'm sure you'll get really creative with that. So we're going to be needing just polyester filling, though I will add a little bit of weight to this one, either with dried rice or a little bit of fine aquarium gravel, just so that it sits really nicely. It's something that you're going to bring out every year, and we would like it to last. So you need some pearl thread or embroidery threads for some of our stitching. We're going to be stitching those eyes and nose on and around those ears, so just choose whatever colours you like that suit your project. So we are going to start now with our body. We'll make our body first, and we're going to start with the arms. So making the arms, we're going to start with the sleeve of our opposite arm here, because I've got that one already made, and I actually add a little trim on the cuff here just because I want it to tie in with my little pom-pom trim around his waist. So I'm just using this little trim here. We're going to add that in a moment. You could add a little bit of lace, anything that you've got, or just keep it plain. Totally up to you. So what we're going to do is, we've got our little arm that curves this way. We're going to sew just a 4mm seam, just that top seam on that arm. Then I want you to press that seam open and flat, ready for us to add that braid. There is that seam stitched and pressed open and flat, and you can see just the front edge there, which will be our front cuff there. I've just turned that under just about 5 centimeters, 5 millimeters, half a centimeter. Press that under, and so now I can go ahead and just stitch my little braid into place across there. You can see that braid stitched into place, and so now we can put right sides together again, line that all up, and we're just going to sew that same 4mm seam allowance, that lower seam here. So that has my completed little sleeve there, all pressed nicely with that trim. So our next step is to go ahead, and as I said, you just trace around your arm shape. Remember that there are 2 different arms. Trace around that shape, and then we just stitch exactly on that line. As you can see, you might be able to see I've already done that there, and left this top end open. So now I'm just going to trim the excess away. I'm going to cut right on that line at the top, and I'm just going to leave myself just about a 4mm seam allowance all the way around. Don't want that fraying away because we haven't got any interfacing on that. Keep your stitch length quite small on the machine for this bit. Perhaps drop it down to a 2 so that those pieces will hold that filling well. There we go. So we just turn that one through and push those, all of those curves out. Forceps are the easiest for turning these pieces through. You want to push all those curves out and roll the seams out. You can even give it a press if you like, because we're keeping this end nice and flat. So push that little hand out, don't push through your seam. Gently does it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I am going to fill with my polyester filling just the very end of that hand and wrist. So just up a little way, but do pack that little hand nice and firm. Really pack it in so that it doesn't slip up back up that arm. So I'll really tuck that in, but I'm only going to fill to just above the wrist here. I've got that one all filled and I've given that top section a nice press. So now what we're going to do is make sure you've got your other arm so you know which way you're putting that one in. We're going to open up the top of that arm and we're going to take that hand all the way through, pop that out at the end, and what we want to do is line up those two top edges of the sleeve. Just adjust that until that is perfectly lined up there, and we've got our second little arm with the hand poking out. Now I'm just going to take this one to the machine and just stitch very close to the edge there, just to close that opening, ready to be popped into the seam. We can now put our two finished arms aside just for the moment while we finish our front. So the first thing you want to do with your front is press on your base, what is your trouser piece. So I've got that one pressed into place, and then I've stitched a line straight up the center there just to give an indication of pants, of a pants leg. Now if you want your design to go all the way around, you can do the same thing on the back if you like. That's totally up to you. This is just a very decorative shelf sitter for me. So I'm just going to focus on the front. So there we go, stitch that line in place. So now I'm going to add something around the waist to just indicate the lower edge of a jacket or a coat. So as I stitch this little braid into place, of course it's going to secure the top edge of that as well. So you might be using something completely different to me, but whatever you're using, now is the time to stitch that one into place. And also I will then stitch straight over the top of that braid, lining up that buckle in the center, straight across that one as well. I'll do them one at a time so they're nicely in place. I have added my two strips of braid. I've got my little buckle there in place, and I've gone ahead and added my two buttons. Don't set those buttons too high, because remember we've got our little head going in there. We don't want those to get in the way. Now our next step, and of course you can do whatever you want to that front there. Our next step is to add the arms into place, ready to be sewn into the seam. So I've done that first one there. You've got a mark on the back of your pattern template there that shows you where that arm starts. So make sure that it's just extending just a little, so that when we sew that seam, that's all going to be nicely caught up within the seam. And just stitch it into place on the side you want it to be. And then I'm going to do the same with this one here, lining up with that mark, and I'll stitch that one also into place, and then we'll be ready to add our back piece. So now I've got everything in place, I'm ready to add my back panel. So we're just going to put right sides together, and it really is just a simple matter of making up like a little sandwich with everything tucked inside, and just clipping that all the way around, matching up the top here, right the way down to the base here. Now we leave our base open, and I actually stitch that with a slightly bigger seam allowance, so closer to your 1/4 inch, so probably around about 5mm. I stitch it around and I sew that one 2 times, one right on top of the other. Make sure you back and forth at your start and finish, then we will be ready to pull that one through. So there we go, that has that body all turned through, and do take the time to roll out all of those seams and check that you did get that little arm incorporated well both sides. And now we can go ahead and start filling. So we're just going to fill with our polyester filling. It's a good size, so it's quite easy to fill. You want to pack it very, very firm so that it holds itself well and it will last for years and years of Christmas celebrations. So I'm just going to start obviously packing it all in at the top there. If you have a wool felting needle, go ahead and use that as you go closer to the base, because we want to fill right till almost the edge and pack that all in nice and flat. If you're going to be adding some weight as I am, get him all filled up and then add your weight really low. So when you're nearly done, add a little bit of weight there. You might even want to pop it in a little stocking, drop it in there and then top it up with your filling to get that nice flat surface, and so that your weight is all at the base there. So I'm going to get this one packed in really firm and I'll show you how that looks. So there we go, that has my body all packed out nice and firm, and you can see there's not much give in there at all. I've added some weight about through this section. Turn that one over and I have packed that all in nice and flat with my wool felting needle. And be careful if you're using a queering gravel or something hard like that for your weight, don't break your felting needle on it. So now I've got that nice and flat. I've gone ahead and I have taken a doubled strand of extra strong thread and I've sewn a running stitch just 5mm in from the edge all the way around, starting at the back. Leave your tail ends hanging right the way around, and I've tied one preliminary knot. We're just going to tuck that base in. So whether you're using a wooden disc or your cardboard disc that you've created, just want to tuck that one in there. You'll find it will fit beautifully. And then you can pull on those thread ends. And we want to give some pressure to that. Make sure it's all nicely centered. Push that disc down. It's much easier to do off camera. Pull that in. It doesn't have to come right into the center, but make sure that it's nicely, the edges are nicely covered. We'll be adding that felt disc over the top of that. So I will pull that in a little bit further and knot that off very firmly about 4 times. I have that base all nicely pulled in, and now we're ready to add that felt cover, which gives it a beautiful professional finish. So I've just got my clear craft glue, something that's suitable for fabric and dries clear and flexible will work. And I've fully coated the back of that felt disc there. You can see liberally coated that with glue, and I'm just going to drop that in over that base, making sure that it's all lined up. Press that into place. And then once that's dry, we're going to be sewing a blanket applique stitch right the way around that edge, which gives it a lovely professional finish, especially if you're giving it as a gift. So stand him up, get him all settled, press down on that, and we will leave that to dry completely before we do any stitching. That base is nice and dry now. I can go ahead and sew my blanket applique stitch. So I have a single strand of pearl thread, and it is 8 ply that I'm using. Nice long strand, and I've got a knot in the end, and I've just come in and just tucked my needle in and brought it out right on the edge there of that shape of that circle there. And we're going to start what is just a blanket applique stitch. Now, blanket applique stitch is done usually on a flat piece of work, but it's done in the same way. So I'm going to take my needle in, go through all of the layers and take up some of that side body fabric. Just coming a little closer for you all to see there. It's a bit hard on the black, but I do need it to be black. So I pulled that first stitch in. Now I'm going to keep my stitches nice and even. They're probably around about 5 millimeters each time, taking some of that fabric on the underneath of the side body, because we're actually sewing it to the side body piece. Pull that one through, and you pull your thread through the loop each time, because that's what gives you that loop, that gives you that binding across the top, making sure that knot is tucked in. So through all of the layers and coming out on that side body fabric and through the loop. And it gives it just such a nice professional finish. I'm rotating my work as I go so that all those stitches are fanning outwards evenly. Make sure each time that you're catching some of that body fabric through the loop each time. So I don't know if you can see there, but we're getting a nice bound edge across the top there, and we'll just follow that all the way around. And there we go. So that completes our beautiful little body. We can actually just pop that one aside and we can get to work on his head. So the first thing we're going to do is start with our front face piece, and we're going to take our top of our head, that top detail, and we're going to fuse that into place. You'll see that it will fit that top curve beautifully. Make sure it's all lined up, and with a hot iron and a protective cloth, get that one pressed into place, and then you can stitch just this lower edge into place in a variety of ways. I'm going to take mine to the machine and sew a very close satin stitch on the machine. You could sew a blanket applique stitch, or you could just sew a machine straight stitch, whatever you like, just to get that one settled in place. So there I have that top brow line stitched into place. You can see that zigzag satin stitch works really well, makes it nice and neat, and I do love the felt there because it gives it that bit of volume. So next I've gone ahead and pressed on my nose and my eyepieces in the same way. Now, to make it easier for you with this one, it is important that the expression is right on this one. I have given you your pattern template and I have got them placed exactly there, so you can make your measurements. You can see exactly where they go. Just copy that template and you will be spot on. So now I'm going to sew around each of those shapes. Now again, you could do it on the machine if you like. You could just stitch a straight stitch, or again a smaller zigzag. This is where I like to do some hand sewing, and I like to outline them in black because we're going for that really animated sort of look. So I've got a single strand of black pearl thread here, a knot in the end. I've just come from behind. I'm going to be sewing a blanket applique stitch, so I will put the link to my video that shows you how to sew this stitch up the top there for you, but I'll show you a couple of stitches here. So I've come out right on the edge, and I'm going to take my first stitch and I'm going to keep them nice and small. I'm using black because it's really going to outline these shapes. So I'm going to come out right on that edge, right where I started, and bring my needle out through the loop. Pull that one in nice and snug. Take my next stitch, keeping it the same length and travelling just a few millimeters. Coming out right on that edge again and bringing my needle out. You can see that the thread is coming through that loop, which is what gives you that top loop. Notice that I'm rotating my work as I go so that all those stitches are fanning out beautifully. You can use embroidery thread for this if you like. If you are using embroidery thread, I would use 2 strands. Got that third stitch, rotating my work again. Have to rotate your work, otherwise you'll get your stitches will all be going on a slant. Again, pulling that needle through that loop. And it's such a beautiful finish, especially for this Christmassy sort of a look. So you can see that. I'm going to continue on around each of those shapes, all in the black. So there we go, I have my stitching finished, and you can see that I've popped my safety eyes in place. Now where you pop those eyes in greatly determines your expression. So I want my little Rudolph to look perhaps a little overwhelmed with taking Santa's place. So we're going to put them up the top and turned in just a little bit. If you want him to look a little sorrowful, drop them down to the bottom, but definitely have a little play with your positioning. You can use eye tester pins, teddy bear eye testing pins, push them through and you can check your eye placement. Alternatively, just use some little buttons and move them around. You can have him side glancing one way or another, little flirty eyes, whatever you like. So but I think that works best for my little reindeer. So I've got those clamped beautifully in place, and the safety eyes with a bit of colour around them, I don't use them very often, but I really love them for this project. So he could even have, you know, a bright topaz eye or a blue around that outside edge would work really well. So now we've got those in place, we're going to move on and make our ears. You can see that little finished ear will be tucked in there like that. So I made mine up with the double felt, as you'll remember, and dark one side and light the other, and I have the dark side that's going to be showing at the front just for a bit of contrast. So all I need to do is blanket stitch the edge of this one. I'm going to start at the base where it won't be seen, and I've got my pearl thread, again an 8 ply, little knot at the end. That knot's going to be hidden, we won't have to worry about that, that will go in the seam. And now we're just going to sew that blanket stitch. Again, I'm going to give you that link at the top there to have a look at my video that shows you really up close how to sew a blanket stitch if you haven't done one before. And it really is just a decorative stitch, and it works really well on this project. So it's just like the blanket applique, only we're going through all of the layers and we're actually making a binding on an edge. So you can see coming through the loop again, keep those stitches nice and small, and it gives a lovely outline to those ears, and it also allows me to bring that lighter brown colour to the front. So there we go, just continue on, coming through the loop each time, and you can see we're going to have that lovely little bound edge, and we're going to work our way all the way around and leave this end open. So once you have those ears blanket stitched, you just want to turn the base into the center. So fold each side to meet in the middle. Throw a couple of tacking stitches there just to hold those like that, and then we will be able to add them to the head. Now you can see there that I've gone ahead and added my couple of little detail buttons. You don't have to do that, you could add anything, little snowflakes, anything you like there, but be careful not to get too close to those seams because you still need to be sewing around there. So now we're going to add these to the front of the head, ready to sew into the seams, and you want to put your right sides together. So this is a side that I want facing out, so I'm going to put my right sides together. You've got a mark on the back of your headpiece that shows you exactly where that ear needs to start. This is your mark for sewing to, and this is your mark for where your ear goes. So you just temporarily just want to take that to machine, or you can hand stitch it, just tack it into place, and then you do the same thing with the other ear, the other side. Once you have those ears in place, look, he's hiding. There he is. So once those ears are in place and you've got those nicely attached, we're going to go ahead and put our headpieces together, matching up our marks. So you've got a mark that you sew to. And it's just a matter of matching that up all the way around. Make sure you're not catching that ear in on the lower side, just that little top bit we want to catch, and line it all up perfectly. And then you just need to sew this one on the machine, but what I like to do is I like to overcast it with a tacking stitch first. Always do my heads that way. I don't want anything moving, and then I'll be absolutely certain that those ears are going to get incorporated into that seam. You can take that seam allowance 4mm, but going over this area you can make it a little broader to about a 5mm seam. Do make sure that you really back and forth over that area, and certainly when you come to the edge here, instead of coming to your point here and just stopping here, graduate out and off the edge there. So straight off. I'm going to do it and then I'll show you. Much easier to show you. So I will stitch around all the way around, come off the edge here, sew that one 2 times and then turn that through. Okay, so just to show you what I meant about going off here instead of just stopping. So here's your mark where you would normally just stop within your seam allowance. As you can see that I've just eased it out and off the edge, both sides. So when we turn that through, when we go to close that top opening, it's going to just all blend much nicer. So you can see there I've sewn my 2 rows of stitching, keep it all nice and beautifully even because that's the bottom of the face. Now we just need to turn this one through. And there we go, that gives us our beautiful little reindeer head, and make sure that you take the time to go round and roll out all those seams. Make sure those ears are perfectly caught within those seams. And now we just need to fill this one up. Now when you're filling this one, you don't want to just randomly fill it and end up with it being full this way. What you want is a flatter style head. So I fill this way with all the edges first, and then I add filling in the middle, being mindful of keeping it more of a domed sort of a shape, because if you just push stuffing in there, it will go into like a football shape, which is not what we want at all. We want to see that lovely face. So I just ease it all the way around those outer edges, really fill out the outer edges first, and then I can just tuck some down the middle. You do need it to be nice and firm. And if you use your forceps, you'll find you can get right down there. You really want to push out that lower chin seam. So I'm going to fill that one all the way up till almost the top, and do use your wool felting needle again if you have one to keep packing those fibres in, and then we'll be ready to close that top opening. There we go, so you can see I've got that face all filled out beautifully there. Now you see what I mean about it keeping it quite flat rather than bulbous out this way. So now we get to sew across the top there, and don't worry, even if it's looks at the moment horribly mangled, it won't when you get it all together. So you just need to squeeze those edges together and make sure you're getting it all nice and straight, and you want to drop a clip in at the top right in the center there. And then I've got my needle with my single strand of 8-ply pearl thread. I'm going to use the same color I used on the ears. Single strand, I've got a knot in the end. So what you want to do is just get in there between those layers where that seam starts. Right between those layers. Tuck that knot in. And I'm going to take my first blanket stitch before that seam even opens out. A few layers to get through there, making sure your needle is coming out through that loop, and really anchor that first one in. I tend to hold it back with my finger there, and then we're just going to make our way across that opening. Pulling that one in as you go. As you start doing that, you'll see that all that buckling will go, and you'll get a nice tidy finish across the top. It also gives us a nice little seam for those antlers to hang on to. So you can see that's going to close up really nicely. So it can just continue on right the way across the top of that head. So now we want to add our finished head. Now that I've got that all stitched up, we want to add that to our body. And I don't think I mentioned at the beginning that we need a large button to do that. So it doesn't matter whether it's 2-hole or 4-hole, we're only using 2 of those holes. So I already have my medium doll needle threaded with a doubled strand of extra strong thread. You can make it 4 strands if you like to be extra strong. And we're going to attach the head by passing that needle right through. So first of all, you want to determine where you want that head to sit. Now you don't want it sitting too high. We don't want him to have a big long neck. I like to have it sitting there just right on the shoulders there. You'll know as soon as you hit that spot. And then the best idea is to make a mark at the back, which I have here. Leave some room at the top for that to push in with your button. And we're going to travel straight through and go into that head. Now, so the way that we do it, it's very difficult. I don't have enough hands to actually show you on camera. So we're going to start by taking our needle through one side of the button, going to go into the body, make sure we're coming out straight. Then we're going to come and take a big stitch across that mark there. And then we're going to travel back through that same passage and come out on the other side of the button. Now I'm going to get that all done and then I'll show you how that looks. So hopefully there you can see what I've done there. So gone in through one side of the button, right through the top of the body, a decent sized stitch across the back of the head and back through again, keeping it all nice and parallel. And then we're just going to pull on those threads to get that head in the right position. So if you pop it on and you don't feel like that's right, simple matter of pulling it off and redoing it. Make sure that head is in the right position before you go ahead, compress all of those fibres and knot that off very tight. You'll probably need someone to hold that knot for you. Knot that off about 4 times and then you can take your thread ends back into the hole and back out through the body just to lose them. Keep it all nice and tidy. So now let's move on to make our little antlers. They're made on that clip, very simple. So you've got your 3 pieces and they all have fusible webbing applied. We remove the backing paper from all 3 of those pieces. We're using fusible webbing in this case just for strength, not for actually fusing. And we're going to be putting the fused sides together and the felt on the outer side. We're not going to be turning this one through. It's such a small piece. This piece we're just going to be gluing on. Now I've got my extra strong thread. I've gone just a shade darker for this and we're going to just stitch around that top edge right down to there. So we create like a little glove pocket. So I'm just going to go in between the 2 layers and it's just the same blanket stitch that we've been using, only of course it's just very tiny. I always start with 2 right on that edge there, just to really hold that. Just so that it's nice and strong on that start point where we slip it over the clip. Do make sure that knot is tucked in. And then continue on and just keep those stitches really tiny. We're going to be adding a tiny little bit of filling and we don't want that to be slipping through. It's the quickest and easiest way, I think, to make some little antlers. Like I said, there's lots of ways to do them, but I always think they tend to look jammed in or stuck in, and this is just a more permanent effect with a lovely finish. So you can see I'm just going to make my way around that whole top edge. And when I get to the base here, I'll do those 2 stitches on top of each other again for strength. So you can see I've got that one all stitched up there and I've gone ahead and I've just filled one side of those antlers now, and it's really firm. I've used my tiny little forceps to do that, and we only need to add filling to each one of those little prongs on those antlers. So your tiny forceps really help push that up there so that they hold themselves really well. This section just sits over the top of the clip so we don't fill the middle section. Just those two pieces there, and there's just a tiny little bit of filling there because when we add that to our clip, it's just going to slip over like that. We're going to wrap the end around the base there. So, but make sure it's nice and firm. It does just sit up nicely that way. So now I'm going to get my hot glue gun ready and I will show you how to put it together. So here we go, I've got my glue gun all nice and hot and ready. So we start with the clip here. Now the front curved section is where the front of our antler goes. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to cover the back section. So the way that we do that, you want to take your glued side of your strip that you've got here. We're just going to, remember with hot glue we've got to work pretty quickly. We're just going to add a little bit on the end there so that we can glue that tab straight in there, just so that's all nicely covered. Hold that in place. Once that's set, we're going to glue it all the way down the back. Line that up, pull that nice and taut. I love hot glue because it's fast, and I hate hot glue because it's fast. But it's really good for some things. It's great. This takes me back to my bow making years where we did all sorts of things with clips, which is where this idea came from. So now we want to really open out that clip. Add a little bit of glue on the end. And we're just going to tuck that in and over that edge. You can clamp that down actually with the clip. Just get right in there. And that has our back section of our clip nicely covered. You actually could make these antlers with craft foam, craft glitter foam, if you wanted a sparkly effect, but you wouldn't sew this section. You'd still cut out all of the three pieces just the same, and you would just glue them in place like I am now. So you can give that a go. Right, so that one is done. So now we're ready for the front, where we're going to tuck this one in place. Make sure you've got it all nice and that there's enough room for that to tuck. So I'm going to add some glue to the end here and then just drop that one in over the top as quickly as I can. So just some glue to hold it. And slip that one in there. Really pull on that tab at the bottom. Pull that down. Then we're going to do the same thing. Add some glue to the front. Pull that one down. Then again, open that clip up. Last bit of glue on that front tab. Just to neatly tuck that edge under. And that gives you your second little antler. So there we go, two perfect little antlers that will clip beautifully onto the top of his head. So now everything's done except for our little sack. Let's get started on our little toy sack. So to make our little sack, it's really simple. First of all, cut out your rectangle of fabric. Try and use a fabric that's got a bit of texture to it. Like I said, I'm using this old linen tablecloth, and what I've done there on the two short sides, I've folded and pressed those edges under just a little, about 4 millimeters, and then stitched those into place so we've got a nice tidy finish. Then you'd want to do the same and press the top across there. Press that down 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters all the way along. Now we're going to be creating a casing for our little braid to slip through, or perhaps you're using ribbon. So we want to sew 2 lines of stitching. That will give us room to thread that braid through. So I'm going to do 1 line of stitching very close to the hem here, all the way across, and then I'm also going to do one about 1 centimeter higher all the way across there, and that will give us our lovely little casing ready to slip our little cord through. So next we put our right sides together, fold those up, line that all up, and we're going to stitch from the lowest edge here where that hemline starts, and we're going to stitch down and across. That can just be about a 5 millimeter seam allowance. Once you have those side seams stitched, I must say this fabric is absolutely awful to sew, slipping around like a snake. So note to self, don't use that again. But it's fine for my sack. Okay, so now I've pressed those side seams and that bottom seam open, and then I've brought my corners together and connected those, lined up those 2 seams. We're going to box those corners. Very simple. You can give it a press like I have, and we're just going to stitch across, straight across that corner, just about 3 centimeters from that point there. So straight across with both of them, and that will give us a nice solid base. And there we have that little one turned through. You can see that's just blocked out that base beautifully there. Make sure you roll out those seams. And I've gone ahead and added my cord through that little casing there, and you've got a nice stable base. I don't cut off those little corners because it adds a little bit of extra strength to that base and helps that little basket, that little sack sit up nicely. So now I'm going to just get that tied off. You can just tie it off in a knot and lose those ends, or you can just tie it, just as I will, just a knot, and slip that over my little Rudolph's arm. So let's get him all put together with his antlers and his presents, and we will see how he looks. So there we go, my early Christmas gift pattern for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have just added a little bit of weight in the bottom of that sack, just so that everything sits nicely. I've piled up all of those presents, as I said, just wrapped up little polystyrene foam squares and shapes in my Christmas fabric. The little bear and the kitty and the puppy, they're all in my patterns as well. Have a look through my video list and you'll find all of those there. It's good to take some of my bits and pieces from my other patterns and mix it all up. So I've kept it really plain, but I know that some of you are absolutely going to add tinsel and sparkle and all sorts of things, and I hope you do that. I hope I have satisfied your Christmas wishes. Well, thank you all for joining me today. You see, I can be jolly at Christmas. I'm jolly for a day. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, you could give this video a thumbs up. That would be absolutely awesome. I'm sure that you're going to do all sorts of exciting things, and I have gone for those very classic colours, but you could make it little Rudolph up in all sorts of metallics. I know that you're just going to do wonderful things, loving all that tinsel and snowflakes, and embellish him any way you like. So I'm looking forward to seeing them, and I will probably see lots of them on our Facebook page. If you haven't joined us, come along and join us. We're absolutely growing and growing and growing, and it's so exciting. So many people being creative, which is exactly why I do this crazy thing I do, get everybody to create and dive into themselves and see what they can do. So thank you all for your support. If you want to step up and make some more complex projects, you can join me in my masterclass. I will also put the link down below for that one. Come along and learn some really amazing doll making techniques and projects for you there. Would love to see you there. Thank you for everybody who's already joined. Looking forward, moving ahead, I'm actually sourcing for you all some new fabrics to use. I want to make some really soft, cuddly bears and animals. So I'm in the process of doing some research there, but I think you're going to be really excited by what I come up with there for you all. So look, everybody have a fantastic week. Add a little bit of Christmas spirit to it this week, and stay safe, everyone. Pass on all of those great things that happen to you in your day. Make sure that you pay them forward. And until next time, it is hooroo from me.